April 20, 2020, crude oil has crashed 305% to negative $36 a barrel. Crude oil has turned negative, for the first time in history. The man that is at least partially responsible for this, is the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro.
Gracias por sobreponerse a tantas agresiones, a tantas mentiras. Gracias.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has won re-election to another 6-year term, in a vote marred by an opposition boycott, and claims of vote rigging. Minutes after Maduro took the oath as President of Venezuela, the Organization of American States approved a resolution in a special session of its Permanent Council, declaring Maduro's presidency illegitimate and urging new elections. The United States, which has slapped sanctions on the Maduro government, called the elections a sham, adding that it would not recognize the results. Many other countries have followed. Juan Guaido has been a key figure in the Venezuelan presidential crisis, which began when the National Assembly, which considered the 2018 Venezuelan presidential election illegitimate, refused to recognize the inauguration of Nicolas Maduro to a second presidential term. Just 18 days after he was chosen to lead the assembly, Guaido announced that he was formally assuming the role of interim president under Article 233 of the Constitution of Venezuela, with the backing of the National Assembly, until free elections could be held. Guaido has been recognized as the acting president of Venezuela by about 60 countries internationally, but support has followed traditional geopolitical lines, with allies China, Cuba, Iran, Russia, Syria, and Turkey maintain support for Maduro. The United States imposed tough economic sanctions against a Russian oil giant Rosneft, that is keeping Venezuela's ruling government afloat. The penalties seek to pressure President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela to give up power, nearly 2 years after he was re-elected in a widely disputed vote. Igor Sechin, who was once Putin's secretary, now is the head of the oil giant Rosneft, and one of Vladimir Putin's closest allies. Sechin issued press release with big news: it would be exiting Venezuela after 10 years and billions of dollars in investments. Russia refused to go along with OPEC's proposal to rescue the coronavirus-battered oil market by further cutting production at the meeting in Vienna. The standoff left the oil industry shell-shocked, and sparked a 10% plunge in oil prices. The OPEC cartel led by Saudi Arabia had proposed a two-pronged approach to its key ally Russia: extend existing cuts of oil production of 2.1 million, and add 1.5 further in cuts. But Russia refused to back the plan at a meeting with OPEC, leaving the future of its 3-year alliance with the cartel in doubt and raising the prospect of a huge supply glut. In response, the Saudis have offered unprecedented discounts to key buyers, in direct competition with Russia. The kingdom also announced it was boosting production to an all-time high, above 12 million barrels a day. Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak fired back in minutes, threatening to raise output by 500,000 barrels per day, in the near future. Russian oil policymakers, influenced by Rosneft chief, Igor Sechin, argued that further cuts would only prolong the opportunism of U.S. shale producers, who had been free-riding on OPEC production cuts since 2016. Following the feud, Dow recorded a new worst point drop on record on March 9, 2020, overtaking the massive loss from February 27. The index closed down 2,014 points, or 7.8%. It was its worst day since October 2008. On April 10, 2020, Saudi Arabia and Russia have reached a deal to cut oil production by 10 million barrels. The deal includes a 5 million barrels per day reduction between Saudi Arabia and Russia, with the other 5 million in cuts being taken by the remaining nations of OPEC. April 20, just 10 days after Saudi Arabia and Russia agree on oil production cuts. Brent oil futures prices plunged, extending oil market panic into a second day with no end in sight to a swelling global crude glut, as the coronavirus pandemic has obliterated demand for fuel. Oil inventories have been building for weeks after Saudi Arabia and Russia early in March failed to come to terms on extending output cuts as the coronavirus pandemic worsened. The main U.S. storage hub in Cushing, Oklahoma, delivery point for WTI, is expected to be full within weeks. Both Saudi Arabia and Russia said they were ready to take extra measures to stabilize oil markets along with other producers, but they have not taken action yet.